All right, well, let's get started. Um, so we do have John Townsend with us this afternoon. Thank you, John. We are talking about test driving your succession plan with an ESOP today on our Elevate webinar series. And my name is Amy Lasala. I'm your host today. We were going to have Paul Freeman on, who's an M&A advisor that has worked with ESOPs and John and I. He is at the moment circling in an airplane, so hopefully he can jump in once he lands, but if not, we'll cover for him. So again, thank you, John, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to our chat today.
That's a lie.
So why don't you share with us maybe just a little bit about your background as a trustee, just to start off with?
Sure. Well, for several years I was in banking, and I've had the opportunity to be a part of several leveraged ESOP transactions. One of the main types of ESOP transactions, and I fell in love with ESOPs and employee ownership. And a lot of people in the community will tell you that, in the employee ownership community will tell you it's almost cult-like, because you sort of realize, what capitalism could be and maybe what it ought to be, and the power of in ESOP as a tool for so many different things. So I was in banking for a while, as I said, and then I was chief financial officer for a couple different companies. There was a fractional CFO and also full time. And then I decided I wanted to do something a little more entrepreneurial. I was with the right people, I had the right people around me who are willing to mentor me and give me point me in the right direction and show me what to do, what not to do. And so I kind of did an appraisal, I guess you could say, of all of my skills that I had been given, biologically, I guess you could say. And then I sort of looked at the high, kind of set the highest, said, what is the highest social goal that I could possibly fulfill while, using those skills, while being able to make a decent living. And employee ownership was just far and away, it was my calling. I knew it was my calling. And I think that once people learn about ESOPs, it's very easy to get excited about ESOPs, even though it's kind of sounds like a boring, and it is sort of in some ways a boring, idea and a reality that's wrapped up with IRS tax code and RISA and all that. But when you just conversationally, when you see it actually in action practice, it's one of the most exciting and most powerful tools in business in existence.
Well, so going on with that, I mean, I think most of us are familiar with what an ESOP is, but could you give us a high level kind of introduction into it for those of us who may not be so familiar?
Sure. So I thought about this. This is a question that comes up once in a while, and it is the dry, sort of boring explanation and true explanation is that it is a qualified retirement plan, and that it invests in the securities or in the shares of privately held companies for the benefit of. There's a trust that's formed, and it's a plan, a qualified retirement plan, excuse me, and it is and it essentially augments the employee's wages with shares in the company. They're given an equity position in the company. So there are some myths about it, and there are some important things to note about it, which we'll get into. But basically, another way to put it is that it can be likened to, it's like an engine, and there's a series of rules and different parameters. And you might have gas engines and electric engines, which might produce torque or mechanical power, but this is a capital engine. So you put labor in, and when the rubber meets the road, what it produces is a diffusion, if you will, of capital, which is essential to capitalism. If you want to, if you're trying to achieve the goals that we're trying, that capitalism was is intended to produce, which is to raise the standard of living for all of the for as many individuals as possible as a result of their labor and their opportunities as the fruit of their labor to own capital, as opposed to just being producers of labor. So it's a plan document, and there's a trust, and it as I said, it sort of distributes the capital owner, it distributes the shares of the company over time to the employee owners, to the participants in the plan, the employee owners accounts every year, according to their W-2 payroll, so what their wages are relative to the total W-2 payroll of the company. They get a percentage of the company. That times the number of years they stay with the company tells you how many shares that they'll be allocated. And each year, the shares are the share price of the company is revalued by a qualified appraiser, and in conjunction with a trustee.
Right. Thank you.
So yeah, it's a way for employees to own companies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of questions that come out from under there. They go, "What, do the employees make the decisions?" Like, well, no, there's a board of directors, and the board of directors makes the decisions. And in most cases, there are some cases where it's got to be put to a vote. But
so, along with the million questions that can come out of that, I know a lot of people are thinking about is, well, how does that benefit myself as the business owner looking to retire? Like, what can an ESOP do for me that an ordinary third-party sale can't?
Sure. So an ESOP can pay fair market value for a company. So it can't pay as much as a strategic buyer. So if you owned a company and there was some larger or similar sized competitor who wanted to buy you out, they may pay a large multiple.
Right.
Some synergies there, but if you looked at, let's say, what a financial buyer would pay, like a private equity firm, that's the kind of levels that we're talking about in terms of what. So you might say, well, my employees don't have the money to buy the company, so why are we talking about this?
Right.
Well, that's the good news, is that it doesn't cost pennies. It doesn't cost the employees a penny. It doesn't cost them a dime to do this. The bank lends the money. Typically, in most cases, there's no personal guarantees required. This is a leverage ESOP transaction.
Mm-hmm.
There's no personal guarantees. If it's a good deal, and banks are being competitive, it doesn't cost them a dime, and it is a way for business owners to sell in rather than selling out. So what does that mean? Well, you could sell outward. You can find an external buyer, and that's the most common approach. That's for some reason, most intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
First thing people think of when business owners think of selling a business. But if you have the right succession management team in place, or you still have some fuel in the tank as the owner, and you want to stay in control of the company, but you still want to take some chips off the table,
Right.
and you want to reward your employees, and you want to inspire them psychologically, financially, culturally, in terms of the company culture and productivity. You can do, an ESOP is really oftentimes the way to go. If you sell as a C Corp, there's what's called a 1042 tax-free rollover. So the sellers can indefinitely defer and even eliminate the capital gain taxes on the sale. So that's a big one for the sellers. And then in 5 or so calendar year ends, they can become an S Corp. 100% ESOP owned S Corp pays no income taxes, state or federal, period. As a C Corp, you can get serious tax mitigation on the corporate level as well. So for the company, got really huge income tax mitigation. They're able to pay off the debt from the acquisition, or the bank loan to the company for the ESOP. to acquire the shares, they're able to pay off that debt with pre-tax dollars. Okay. For the shareholder, they're able to indefinitely defer and even eliminate the capital gain taxes on the sale of the company. Depending on what state you're in, that can be huge. Right now, it's 23.8% federal tax on your capital gain, and depending on what state you're in, it could be as high as 13 or so percent on top of that. So that's a very attractive feature of ESOPs. And of course, the employees get, get something that they weren't expecting to get.
Oh, right.
And the owner is able to, again, above and beyond the tax benefits, able to stay in control. Let's say they stay in control, right? And they're able to preserve their legacy and make sure that their employees' welfare and their how they're treated is kept intact.
Mm-hmm. I know that's a big thing when talking to business owners, is they want to maintain that legacy and make sure the employees are taken care of, because they've been a family to them for when they've been running a company for so long and working together.
Especially when it's a family-owned company.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
What about the timing of a sale? I know, at least for a third-party sale, we generally see the time frame of a transaction around 9 months. What does it look like for an ESOP?
It really depends on how committed the seller is and how knowledgeable the seller is, and sort of how they were introduced to the transaction. So if they have a trusted advisor, maybe an attorney who works with or are themselves familiar with their ERISA regulations, but with ESOPs, if they have a financial advisor or CPA who's familiar with ESOPs, things can go much faster. You can get things done. And you have your succession management team sort of already in place. You could do it in 3 months. But 6 months or not 9 months, people kind of typically aren't really in a huge rush to get things done. Typically, because an ESOP typically comes with a lot of forethought and good planning, and that's when it's really the most effective.
Okay.
But the title of this webinar was test driving your succession management plan. So how long it takes for the transaction to occur is not really as material as you might think when we're talking about test driving your succession management plan. So let's say that you were thinking about a management buyout or some way of an internal sale, selling to your employees, money being equal, especially on an after-tax basis, staying in control and sort of doing things smart and leaving and giving your employees ownership of the company, who works with the loyal employees,
Mm-hmm.
who have stayed so long. That's if you're wanting to test drive your succession management plan, or your succession, your exit plan for your strategy for your business, you might sell in 2 or 3 phases. So you might do the first 30%, right?
Okay.
You might do the first 30% and see how that goes. You take some chips off the table, no personal guarantees. Companies now has lots of tax mitigation coming in. They're paying up. It's able to pay off the principal with pre-tax dollars instead of after-tax dollars. And it gets the employees excited, right? And then you form your board of directors, and you've got your ESOP committee maybe, and now you're getting employees. You still retain majority control, of course. Let's say you did 49 or 30%, like I said, sale in the first tranche. But you're still kind of testing the waters. You've seen how it goes, so it's part of a longer term plan. You're able to take, maybe say millions of dollars off of the table. The employees you're paying off the debt with pre-tax dollars, and you're getting the employees comfortable with the idea of one day being the owners of this company. And so that's how you get to test drive, if you do it in a phased series of transactions, 2 or 3 or more transactions instead of 100% sale all at once. You're able to do a lot of great things that we've talked about and we'll talk about, and and sort of a test drive before you buy, if you will.
Yeah. What about if we have minority stakeholders and they're looking to exit? Is that possible through an ESOP?
Yeah, the ESOP is a great way to. There's different strategies for that. The ESOP is an excellent way to, um, uh, uh, without bringing in some new unfamiliar partner,
Right.
uh, in order to get tax advantages and get the employees motivated. It's a great way to buy out an existing partner. It's just through an ESOP, absolutely.
Well, that could be a good way to test drive your succession plan as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. There was something on here.
Just, the on the flip side, there's also the ESOP as an acquisition vehicle, which is just
Yeah.
amazing, just an amazing, exciting thing uh, for a lot of people. Uh, people who, we've Paul, if he was on, would tell you about people, business owners getting really excited, especially when they're still in their 50s or 40s or even their 30s in one case, um, about using the ESOP as an acquisition vehicle, because you're going out there and you're limiting your risk, because there's no personal guarantees necessarily in the bank's perspective on the debt for use for the acquisition.
Okay.
So if it's a good deal and you're using an ESOP to do it, uh, and, and you don't need, and the trustee approves, but you don't need the employees to vote off on it. Anyway, you can go out and you can acquire companies and just build this larger and larger and larger company, by making acquisitions. Uh, you're going to be more competitive on pricing, whether you're in construction and you're bidding on things, or manufacturing and you're making things, or you're in distribution, or whatever your line of business you're in. You don't pay taxes, right? The employees pay the taxes on, when they retire or leave the company. They
Mhm.
pay, and the company does repurchase the stock from them in exchange for cash, and they pay the taxes. But the company itself, um, is not is either, if it's 100% ESOP owned, is not subject to, generally not subject to income taxes. There might be one state, I think, in there that still is not playing ball, but in 49 other states, there's no income taxes, so you're able to really outcompete and undercut your competitors on pricing, if that's what you wanted, if that was a strategy you chose to do, if you needed to, especially. And so that gives you an advantage there. Then when you're beating up your competitors on pricing, then you can go out and you can beat them up and buy, so to speak. You can then say, okay, well, now we're going to buy you, and the bid's going to be great, because you can if that's the way they want to go, you can give the sellers the opportunity to defer capital gain taxes on the sale. So you're offering them $10 million. It seems it's on an after-tax basis, it's 10 million. So any private equity company or any other buyer any non-ESOP buyer that might come in and try to compete with you, has to really pay more in order to, on an after-tax basis, compete with your bid.
Right. Right.
So you're getting companies cheaper than you might otherwise. And you're also able to outcompete your non-ESOP competitors. So that's just that's kind of the dream, I think, for a lot of people. Especially there's a group of people over at Stanford, I think it is there, and they started what's called ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. They started these things called search funds, and the ESOP is if you're looking to grow a really large company and make all your employees filthy stinking rich, which is actually a quote from Mark Cuban. It's what he said he would do if tax rates went to zero. So Mark, if you're watching this, use the ESOP as your acquisition vehicle. It's a fantastic way to grow a very large company while reducing your risk and really motivating employees and diffusing the capital, uh, in a purely capitalist fashion. It's really is the truest form of capitalism. Is the ESOP, is my philosophical belief.
So David wrote in a question. He would like to hear your experience around how you've seen banks or lenders structure leveraged ESOP transactions.
Okay, well, typically, the first thing you should note is that a lot of so there's right now there's something interesting going on. There's SBA lenders are trying to figure out this ESOP thing. It just blows their mind that because most ESOP transactions are typically larger. A lot of them are, not always, but a lot of them are. So in a leveraged ESOP transaction, conventionally, let's not talk about SBA for now, but conventionally, they will look at the collateral base of the company. They'll look at just as you would in any other lending situation, except that they're willing to lend more on or on better terms because of the tax advantages and because of the productivity enhancements that you see just for free. I mean, there's no other. I mean, if you want to increase productivity, usually you can buy a piece of equipment or do something, right? You have to spend some money. This is just sort of like magic. I mean, you basically spend no money, essentially, no more money than you would to sell if you're a broker, or less than that. And they will look at 3-4 times EBITDA, and those typically there'll be a seller note as a component, subordinated debt will be a component. And just like any other transaction with any other borrower, except there's no personal guarantees and no money down required. Yeah, I think that pretty well explains it. Yeah. You really just need to have solid, balanced succession management or management team. But the only difference between a conventional buyer, there's no credit score check and et cetera, right? There's no individual, there's no personal guarantees, there's no money down required because the ESOP has no money. And all the banks, all the big banks, all the noteworthy banks, the top 100, top 20, top 50 largest banks and more, have a lot of them, most of them have their own dedicated ESOP groups that just do ESOP lending. So it's important that you get in touch with those folks if you come to someone like Blue Sky Advisors or myself, it's good to get a nice warm introduction to those players because they get it. You don't want to just go to any old lender, a conventional lender, because they'll eventually just have to go to someone that understands ESOPs.
Right.
It is niche in that sense. Yeah.
Straight to the right source then. Let's talk about real estate and how that can be involved in the sale and beneficial to the owner.
There are certain stipulations, but you can, if you wanted to indefinitely defer or eliminate even, or let's call it a tax-free rollover, if you wanted to roll the proceeds from the sale of the real estate and that meet certain criterion, you can include the real estate in the sale tax-free. You can include it in any case, but you can include it in the deal in the stock sale of the company, and also eliminate the capital gain taxes on the real estate component of the sale as well through the 1042 rollover we talked about, which is IRS Code Section 1042. And we can talk more about that if you'd like.
You're going to read us the IRS code.
Yes, the next 35 minutes will just be me reading you the IRS tax code.
No, thank you.
It reminds me of Andy Kaufman with Andy Kaufman, right? The comedian, when he just read Great Gatsby for like an hour until everyone left. Right?
All right. What about personal goals of a business owner? Something like charitable giving. How does that help them with an ESOP?
That's something that I have not had too much experience with, but it marries very well. I know that ESOPs, and so it's important to know that as a trustee, you always have 3 parts to the ESOP trustee, to the ESOP transaction team. At least three parts. You have the trustee. I'll put them here because I'm the trustee. I'll put them on top of the triangle. And then you have, because that really is the fiduciary. That's the person who's making the decisions. They have to rely. They can't. They get advice from the other 2 components, which are their legal counsel and their financial counsel. The legal counsel will typically be an ERISA attorney, whose their client is the trustee. The trustee hires them on, and they'll have financial counsel. The financial counsel will typically be someone like a CVA or an ASA, an accredited senior appraiser. So someone who has the proper accreditation to value businesses and who's meets other qualifications, like they can't have valued the company or ever interacted with the company in the past in terms of doing evaluation. But so they have to really be on the ESOP side. So the trustee hires the attorney and the evaluator, we call them, and that's your buyer group.
Okay.
That's your buyer group. I think that I answer your question.
Well, so we were talking about how that would potentially work with charitable giving goals.
Right. Oh, right. So there's what's called a CHESOP, which is that's what they call it, and that's where you can that's where you kind of fit together the ESOP with a charitable remainder trust, which is another way.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be structured in such a way that it's not kind of pre-planned, but from what I know, it's that the selling shareholder will donate and therefore get a personal income tax, personal tax, the deduction on the personal side, donate the stock to the charity, and the charity can then, of their choice, can then sell the shares to the ESOP, and then so the corporation gets a tax deduction on that side as well. So totally, that's a very powerful tool, and that's something that someone like I would look to my financial counsel and my legal counsel to kind of guide me on that one, and such as Blue Sky Advisors, or my the attorney or their financial advisor and the trustee will usually look into that. It would require a little more research on my side, but just as I stated, that you can rely upon that information is how it works. And when charitable giving is a primary objective, ESOP is going to fit perfectly with that kind of mentality. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as a lot of the trusted advisors that we work with are financial advisors, that would be something they'd be talking to their clients about and give them another option of how to do that in a way that benefits everybody. So I think that's great.
Yeah, if you're a financial advisor and you're listening to and you're watching and listening to this, you're going to get presentations and people trying to sell you things all day long. I'm sure, and they'll take you to lunch or whatever to listen and something, and go to Ruth's Chris and to learn about whatever mutual funds or something, or some sort of security, some sort of product. But this is an ESOP is something you can have in your arsenal that will, if you want to use a warlike term, have it in your arsenal that will differentiate you from your competitors, help you get more assets under management, because there's always going to be a liquidity event, and that money's going to stay with you, and you're going to look like the hero, because on an after-tax basis, you're almost always going to get the best deal if things, if the right criterion apply with an ESOP, and they're going to love you and they're going to thank you for it.
Yeah.
If it's the right fit for the company, and there are a lot of companies where it works. It just depends on the size and the nature of the company, but you're going to look like a hero. And there's also other opportunities to grow your business besides your assets under management growing. You're also going to have the opportunity to sell like corporate-owned life insurance, perhaps. It's important to have sometimes. And other products. So this is really a solid. It's not just another product to sell. This is a real strategy and a real benefit to your business owners looking for an exit strategy that's going to benefit everyone, tax wise and beyond.
Right. So if I were a business owner and I'm considering selling, and after listening to this or talking with my trusted advisor and hearing about an ESOP, what's the next step? Who should I reach out to? How does that look?
Oh, well, I really, it's difficult to say, because I'm not, from a business owner standpoint, I mean, a lot of them will go to, and this really doubles up on fees, and it makes it can make it expensive. And, gosh, you see so many myths that need to be debunked. You'll see a lot of articles on debunking myths on ESOPs for that very reason. But the first step, in my opinion, would be to call up an ERISA attorney, find a trustee, call me, call Blue Sky Advisors, call one of the three components of that triangle, right? So either the trustee, the business valuator, or the attorney, and the ERISA attorney, who deals with ESOPs, call one of them, and they're going to immediately say, "I have the perfect transaction group for you," and they can, of course, the trustee has to make their own decisions on who their evaluator is going to be,
Mhm.
but it's more of an amicable selling situation, so you can kind of work together on a lot of things. But the first step would be to get in touch with one of those three groups or firms or individuals, and to say, "Hey, what do I need to do?" You also get in touch with your CPA, and really, if depending on what they say, how much experience you really have with ESOPs, and because that may or may not, they may or may not have the right kind of information
Okay.
that would be helpful to you. As I was talking to you about earlier, just prior to starting the webinar, I
Mhm.
saw a YouTube video which was like, I typed in like, "Are ESOPs good?" or something like that to on YouTube, and this gentleman who was seemed very knowledgeable in a lot of respects in terms of financial planning, for personal financial planning, completely missed the mark. Completely missed the mark. I don't know. See if I know what his name was.
Oh, we don't need to bring that
I don't
up.
want to call him out. I don't want to call him out. I don't. But it was like, is an employee stock ownership plan a good idea? And it was like completely missed the mark on it. And so you want to make sure that you really speak to someone who's really done ESOPs in the past and is really an inch wide and a mile deep,
Yeah.
right? Meaning that they
Yeah.
really specialize in that thing and that niche,
Right.
in ESOPs.
Right.
That's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
David has another question for us. Do you find certain industry segments more than others in ESOP transactions? Or is there a specific industry that they don't work in? I added that last part.
It's sort of, I don't know if you want to use the term seasonal or not, or cyclical or something. I mean, right now there's a lot of, it depends on who's looking to sell their business. But
Right.
no, and there are certain industries that are great for bank loans, and there are certain industries that if you have you want a large enough payroll, right? Because your tax deductions that come with. See, every time I say something, I'm like, well, no, technically you could do this, but I mean, no, really, it's industry agnostic.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of an industry where it just wouldn't work. I can't think of one.
Okay.
Cannot think of one. Maybe like Vice Industries or something where you could. I mean, if you want to do a leverage ESOP transaction where you got liquidity at closing,
Mhm.
Vice Industries probably wouldn't work because a bank won't lend on it.
Okay.
But then again, there are these self-funded ESOP strategies where you can use the cash on the balance sheet, or you can just use a seller note, and you can kind of create your own private equity deal kind of thing. But no, I don't know of any companies or any industries where it works or doesn't work, just black and white like that. It's if you have employees and you're making money and you want to sell your company, you could look into doing an ESOP, and you just kind of, we call it, well, you might want to call it maybe a minimum of 400,000, 500, 350, $500,000 in free cash flow, or in EBITDA, depending on what your capex is. But yeah, you're in EBITDA, and you want at least 15, 20 employees would be like about the minimum.
Okay.
Well, industry-wise, not so much.
All right, we have another question from Jason. Can you briefly touch on employee age distribution as it relates to the long-term viability of the ESOP?
Yeah. Okay. So you want to conduct what's called a feasibility study to get started, and you want to look at a repurchase obligation study, and you just want to make sure that you're going the best route in terms of whether it's an S corp or a C corp, and you want to look at how many employees you have that are close to retirement age. So how many of them are 55 and older, and you're going to want, when you speak with your valuation expert. I think that's kind of beyond this. It'll take us like, we could talk about all these kind of things in detail, but I'll just say in general, you want to you want to plan things out, right? You don't just want to jump in and not like someone's just going to write you a check for, like, here's a briefcase cash full of money. Of course, yeah, take that. I mean, I guess just take that deal, if depending on the deal. But but you want to do as much preparation as you would. The buyer is going to want to do as much preparation as they can. The trustee, as they would, as any other buyer would in a transaction. In this case, since the employees, from the date that the ESOP is adopted, will start as participants in the plan. They have to have like 1,000 hours a year of service to count to get allocations of shares. There are some other rules, but shares for that year. But if you have a whole lot of employees that are close to retirement age, you want to plan accordingly. And in many cases, not always, in many not always, but in many cases, you don't. The company doesn't have to actually start making payments to the plan participants who retired or terminated or left the company. It's different in the cases of disability or death. They don't actually have to start making payments, cash payments in exchange for the stock when they leave the company, when the employee owners leave the company, until the debt's been repaid. And then they even have, even further than that, they have a number of years, over a number of years, you have the option to pay out an employee. Of course, if you're growing very fast, you want to pay them off as quickly as possible. But anyway, so you need to do proper planning, and age is something that needs to be factored in and considered. But
so if you do have
it's not an obstacle for planning correctly.
If you do have a group of employees that are nearing or at retirement age, there are still some options for you to minimize that payback if they all retired the same year.
Well, I mean, if everybody's planning to retire, hoping on all of us on a mass exodus,
Right.
I mean, if everyone's worked 20 years and when they all retire at the same time, that would be bad.
That would be bad, yeah.
So you want that, but that's, hopefully you want to try to inculcate the type of culture of transparency and communication and pride and work, cooperativeness. And everybody wants to say, hey, look, you're approaching retirement age. Can we talk about that, owner to owner? And you want to have the board of directors communicating and maybe even ESOP, ideally an ESOP committee, who serves as kind of like the bridge between the board of directors and the rest of the employees. So that's,
yeah.
I mean, I think that's very important. That all goes into the planning of an ESOP. But when you get it right, it really works.
Yeah.
It really works.
Yeah. Brian, Brian has a question. Can you touch on rollovers from ESOP distributions to IRAs?
Okay. So they're saying that if a company leaves, if the employee owner leaves the company, they can roll over their shares into an IRA from the company shares into an IRA.
Okay. Are you familiar with any tax implications with that, or is that beyond?
It's beyond the scope of this discussion. I mean, I'm not one to give financial advice to anyone, to anyone except for the plan. I act on behalf of the. I try to do what's best for looking at the plan assets, the plan itself, not the business, but the plan assets itself. Not always, usually not the business, unless it's being acquired as an offer to be acquired or some such. But I think about the workers not as they are presently, but as they are. I think of them, try to make the best decisions I can as retirees. Think of them as retirees, and make the best decisions for the plan participants in that way. So, as far as giving advice, otherwise, that's something that they would look to. They would want to do on their own, or
Sure.
talk to the ESOP committee or their board, and as many people as they can about.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, having this discussion, I think, was great. It covered a lot of information that I know, John, you could have gone a lot more in depth on a lot of things.
As you know me, once I get going, I'm going to stop talking about ESOPs. I think every hot dog stand I go by, I should be ESOP, But I not that I eat a lot of hot dogs, But I got to say, if you're a financial advisor, a business broker, if you're a banker and you're looking to save a deal, so many applications in that, and it's so important for us as capitalists, because there's different types of capitalists, right? There's a barbarous form of capitalism. There's like this technological form of capitalism. There's also a just form of capitalism, where this is the opposite of communism, or at least in the way that, like, say, Karl Marx and his posse would have explained it, which was to each according to their need. Whereas the Louis Kelso, who wrote the Capitalist Manifesto and actually sort of invented the ESOP, although it wasn't passed into law until after his death, unfortunately, one of my heroes, said that, each according to their productivity. And so the ESOP really is the pure form of capitalism. When you form an ESOP, you are making more capitalists, and that tends to be the problem with capitalism. And that's why we think that we're seeing, Donald Trump's success recently. Whatever you think of him as a person or as a president, I'm not going to say what I think or who I voted for or what I would do next time. But when you think about capitalism, pure capitalism, and the reason why Donald Trump has had such success is because of this big disparities between the have and the have-nots, this populist mentality that's going on. And it's just strange, because capitalism is based upon, like, it only works if you really want to try to accumulate as much capital as you can, become as rich as you possibly can. Somebody's got to have that drive, otherwise capitalism is not going to work. Right. At the same time, if that were true, then, like, all the capital would condense and crystallize into, like, the top 1% or something all at once. And if there were no mechanisms for diffusing the capital in exchange for hard work and labor, then capitalism also wouldn't function. So that's sort of kind of the philosophical underpinnings of ESOPs. And I would just, if we're going to end this, we'd go into Q&A. I would just say that presenting your clients with the ESOP alternative should go hand in hand with presenting your ESOPs and your clients with alternatives to sell to external buyers. So if you're an M&A advisor, a financial advisor, let your clients know, your valued clients know, or all your clients, whether you value them or not, let the business owners know that there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum, and there's the external and the internal, and that they need to explore all the options. And a great thing to do if you're an M&A advisor, or you're trying to help a business owner, or you're a seller, in the company is for sale by owner, you're selling it with no representation, whatever it is, you want to look. The first thing you should do is look into an internal bid, right, to sell in instead of selling out. And then once you get the offer from the trustee and that's the ESOP transaction group, then you have your baseline. You say, okay, well, if we do want to sell to an external buyer, they have to at least meet or exceed and contend with this offer. And it's a great way to screen out the looky-loos and the buyers, or just kicking the tires, buyers. And it's a fantastic way to, at worst, which is not really that bad, it's kind of a stalking horse bid. So the ESOP, the internal bid, if it's right for the company, is the first thing that you should do, especially given the tax advantages it comes with, the cultural advantages, the company cultural advantages it comes with, the ease with which you can just get a standing buyer right there to do it. And if you don't want to sell 100% all at once, you can do a phase that you can test drive your succession plan. Right. So there's nothing to stop you from doing a 30 or 49% deal to begin with, but still keep marketing the company and looking for an external buyer. So taking some chips off the table, giving some incentive to the employees, and considering, doing it in phases, but it doesn't stop you from marketing the company as 51% or 70% or whatever owner you are. And still selling the company to, say, a private equity firm. Something to stop you there from doing that. So you can really test drive before you buy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's open it up to any additional questions, or if you'd like John to elaborate maybe on one or two topics. We have about 15 minutes left.
Yes, I'm aware I look a little bit like Jimmy Fallon. I don't know how it's coming across in the camera, but I was told that 3 times today. So,
Jimmy Fallon.
So well, thank you. All right, that's what he said.
Oh, that's funny. Well, in the meantime, how many ESOPs have you gone through? Or how are you a trustee of, John?
Well, if you look at what my transaction group, so I use a couple attorneys and a couple evaluators. And, there's a collection of them. You want to get the right person that because you think is going to fit well with the in the transaction group as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I work with all together. It's me in the hundreds of ESOPs.
Oh,
So
wow.
very, very experienced team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty exciting. I've seen a lot of I've gotten to meet a lot of very interesting people, and I've been blessed to have been part of a lot of transactions and visit a lot of cities around the world that I never would have around the country that I never would have been able to otherwise. So
That's cool.
very, very blessed to have been to work with so many professionals, including Blue Sky Advisors.
Yeah.
So would be in the hundreds. Yeah. Not me personally. I would be in the dozens.
Yeah.
But,
I was gonna say you're a very busy man. If you're doing
I every day, I get up and I try to. So I mean, there's two ways to kind of market yourself as a trustee. There's a passive way and there's a more active way. I try to be more active. I try to really evangelize, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
get people excited. Once you get somebody hooked in the idea, and they're like, wait a minute, you could so hypothetically, you could acquire a company with no money down and no personal guarantees. Technically, you could do. I mean, like that by itself. So you got some people they're like, wow, wait a minute. So I put my own money in, and then I could take over the board, and I could grow a really great company, and it'd be employee owned, and we'd all be really great. It's like, yeah, that you could do that. You could that's a really interesting conversation with a lot of young MBAs.
Yeah.
People, and good luck to them.
Well, I don't have any additional questions coming in, so I think we've covered about everything we had originally on our agenda. One last thing I want to point out that John shared with me this morning is there are over 11,000 ESOP-owned companies in the U.S., and some of them, we all know, General Mills, Men's Warehouse, Publix, Winco, Paychex, Graybar, lots of companies. So this isn't anything new. I'm sure you've all were aware of ESOPs before today. But there's so many benefits that I think business owners may not be aware of. And when they're considering that sale, that they could not only benefit themselves, but their employees as well. And like you said, build a stronger, more profitable company by doing an ESOP instead of a third party.
No matter what state you're in, if you have huge income tax mitigation or you've zeroed out income taxes on a corporate level, and your competitors down the road are paying taxes, you're going to have a huge competitive advantage. That's just from a financial perspective.
Yeah.
Employees are more motivated. The seller is getting a heck of a deal and is able to customize the risk that's entailed with the sale pretty much without cash being equal, price being equal. They're able to stay in control. They're able to preserve legacy. I mean, there's so many things that the banks love it because the debt gets repaid way faster and it's way less of a risk. It was Chris Nichols, who's the chief strategy officer over at Center State Bank, which is one of the top 100 largest banks in the nation. If you type in Chris Nichols ESOP, you get Center State correspondence. You've got some website on there, and you type in ESOP and listen to his webinars. I'd like to meet that guy because he is really he really hits the nail on the head. And he's actually writing and making webinars and podcasts for his bankers, and says you need to be chasing ESOPs because these are the best deals out there. And having an ESOP by itself is a standalone credit indicator of a quality company. And you'll find that companies that have ESOPs or are ESOP owned, there's no bubblegum wrappers in the parking lot. They really take pride in their company, and they have huge tax advantages, and they'll work harder. You'll find them they're like saving paper clips, and it's if you get everybody really involved, then you can grow. You can grow a stronger company than any other company than could possibly ever exist. I mean, I mean, if you did it right. I mean,
Right.
employees owning a company with a professional board of directors is going to outperform the S&P. It will outperform the S&P every year. I think that literally is. Look at the statistics.
Yeah.
Employee-owned companies outperform the market consistently. Return on assets goes up. Employee longevity goes up. I mean, there's a few downsides, but it's only if you don't plan well, or if your company doesn't really fit as an ESOP. It's too small, or it doesn't have certain characteristics. But that's all. That's what I would try to convey in this message right now, is that if you're a financial advisor, you can grow. You can help make your clients make the right decision and have their company survive. Maybe generations and generations and generations longer than it would have if it were sold to a private equity or some other financial buyer, and be much more profitable and leave a legacy, and on an after-tax basis, grow their wealth and grow your business at the same time, in a way that just you can't do without employee ownership.
Right.
It's kind of magic that way, in terms of getting something without investing anything.
Yeah. Well, I thank you, John, for joining us on the webinar today. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to email them over. I will add John's contact information on the link for the video, so if you want to review it, or if you have any questions you'd like to ask John, you can reach out to him directly as well.
Look at Applied Employee Ownership Strategies. That's aeosholdings.com. Check it out. And Blue Sky Advisors, of course, one of our go-to sources for filling that extremely important evaluator role in these transactions. So thank you very much, Amy. Thank you, everyone. I wish we would have had more questions, but I don't blame you for not wanting to, have me go on and on about ESOPs. But if you have any questions, I'd love to field them with Amy. Please get in touch, and we'd love to talk a little bit more about employee ownership and how it's really benefits everyone involved.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you on our next Elevate webinar.
Thank you very much.
Bye, John.
Bye-bye.